come with me to build a wedding cake. So this order was for a 3-tiered cake with 3 different flavors, and it was going to be a semi-naked cake. So typically for a wedding cake, I will go ahead and trim off the excess caramelization around the outside of a cake so that way everything looks nice and pretty for pictures. But when you're doing a semi-naked cake, you need the structure of the outside to remain firm, so that way when you put on your buttercream, it doesn't pull all of the crumbs off into the crumb coat because there is no final coat. And you might not notice the exterior caramelization for something like a chocolate cake, like I'm frosting here, but you will notice it for like a vanilla, chocolate, or lemon cake, which you'll see coming up. So for this 3-tiered cake, again, 3 different flavors. I'm right now doing the middle tier, which is a double chocolate cake, and I'm doing a white chocolate ganache because that's going to be what coats the outside. And so I did that ganache buttercream barrier, so that way none of the chocolate showed through and did not ruin my final exterior design. I'm going through minimal frosting just to kind of smooth out the edges. I'm going to pop this in the fridge so that way everything is nice and set. Moving on to my bottom tier, this is a 10-inch 4-layer cake, and it's going to be a vanilla cake with a raspberry jam marble, and then I'm filling it with a white chocolate ganache that is also flavored with vanilla bean, so it's super nice and rich and super flavorful. I also whip my ganache so that way it remains nice and light and fluffy, so that way when they go to cut into the cake, it's not like cutting through a solid bar of chocolate. Since these cakes are 4 layers, I am putting a board in between the 2 layers so that it separates it basically into 2 cakes. This helps with serving, so when you're going to cut down whoever's cutting the cake, they're only going to have to cut through 2 layers of cake and then pull out that slice instead of having to cut through all 4 and then cut that slice in half. This is a personal choice. I do this a lot for people, especially when they're not having a caterer cut the cake. I think the mom was cutting the cake and they both worked with cake, so they're very familiar, but it's just a stylistic choice and a personal choice, so that way it helps with the serving, so you know each person is getting a certain amount of serving. And speaking of servings, they wanted to feed 100 people between the 2 bottom tiers because the couple wanted to keep the top tier. And so I went for a 6-inch, nope, I went for a 10-inch bottom 4-layer, which feeds around 60, 30 from the top 2 layers and 30 from the bottom 2 layers. And then the 8-inch 4-layer would feed around 48, maybe 45, about 24 from the top 2 layers and 24 from the bottom 2 layers, giving them right around 100 slices. When I quote couples for cake pricing and their sizes, I always base off the square cutting method, which is what is mostly used for parties. And I use a 1.5-inch by 1.5-inch square that for this is going to be only 4 inches tall since I'm only doing a 2-layer cake. If it's a 3-layer cake, it would be closer to 6 inches tall. And this to me is a really great serving size for any general party. And I do this so that way if the family is a really big cake lover family, each person get a decent slice of cake, or if they realize they have more guests than they thought, they can cut it down to wedding serving sizes. And come back for part 2 when I go ahead and put the cake together.